Welcome to Eerie Tales for Restful Sleep, where soothing rain meets gentle horror for peaceful nights. Subscribe, like, comment, and share to join our brave night owl community. Sleep tight, if you dare.
The mall security guard. What if the place you feel safest after dark is actually the most dangerous? What if the job you've done for years, the one you could do with your eyes closed, suddenly turns on you? This is the story of Jim Martinez, a night security guard who thought he'd seen it all, until the night the laughter started. Jim had worked at Riverside Mall for 8 years. He knew every inch of the place, the echoing corridors, the flickering exit signs, the way the air always smelled faintly of popcorn and cleaning chemicals. Most nights his job was simple. He patrolled the East Wing, where the movie theater and chain restaurants still drew crowds, even on weeknights. He'd nod to the last stragglers leaving the arcade, check the doors, and settle in with a cup of coffee to watch the security monitors until sunrise. But tonight was different. Management needed someone to sweep the West Wing, an abandoned section of the mall that had been closed for 3 years, sealed off and left to rot. Construction crews were scheduled to start demolition in the morning, and they wanted one last check to make sure nobody was squatting inside. Jim didn't mind. He'd done it before. The West Wing was always empty, always silent, always a little colder than the rest of the building. He chalked it up to bad insulation and the lack of foot traffic. He started his rounds at 11:30 p.m., flashlight in hand, boots squeaking on the cracked tile floor. The West Wing was a time capsule from a different era. Every store was shuttered, metal gates pulled down, windows covered with thick black plastic. The only light came from the emergency exit signs, casting everything in a dim, bloody red glow. The air was stale, heavy with dust and the faint, sour tang of mold. Jim moved methodically, checking each entrance, tugging on the chains and padlocks. Everything was secure. He made a note in his log, more out of habit than necessity. He never found anyone in the West Wing before. The place was sealed up tighter than a tomb. He was halfway down the main corridor when he heard it, a laugh, high-pitched, sharp, and completely out of place. It cut through the silence like a knife, echoing off the bare walls. Jim froze, his flashlight beam locked on the floor. The sound didn't belong here, not in this dead mall, not in this forgotten wing. He tried to tell himself it was nothing, maybe a radio left on by a construction worker or a prank from the cleaning crew. But the laugh came again, closer this time, unmistakably real. It was a woman's laugh, but there was something wrong about it. Too sharp, too loud, too alive for a place that was supposed to be empty. Jim's scalp tingled. The hair on his arm stood up. He'd dealt with trespassers before, teenagers breaking in for TikTok videos, homeless people looking for a warm place to sleep. But the West Wing had been sealed for months. He'd checked every entrance himself at the start of his shift. There was no way in. He moved toward the sound, every step echoing in the empty corridor. The laughter was coming from inside Forever Young, an old clothing store about 30 feet ahead. The security gate was down, heavy steel links forming an impenetrable barrier. The display windows were covered with black plastic, taped securely around the edges. No gaps, no way in. Another laugh even closer. Jim's throat went dry. Sweat prickled on his forehead even though the air was cool. He took a deep breath and called out, "Security, this is a restricted area. Come out with your hands visible." His voice sounded steadier than he felt. The laughter stopped. Silence fell, thick and absolute. Jim could hear his own heartbeat, too fast, too loud. He moved closer to the storefront, scanning for any sign of entry. The gate was intact. The plastic sheeting was undisturbed, but the darkness behind the windows seemed deeper than it should be, more absolute, as if the light itself was being swallowed. A scraping sound came from inside the store, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming toward the front of the store. Jim's hand went to the radio on his belt, but he hesitated. What would he say? That he heard laughing in a sealed store? He could already imagine the jokes in the break room. The footsteps stopped, right on the other side of the gate. Jim raised his flashlight, trying to peer through the small gaps between the metal links. "This is your final warning," he said, voice tight. "Identify yourself." A soft thud against the gate made him jump back. Then another, and another, like someone tapping their fingers one by one against the metal. The laughter started again, but this time it was different, low, gurgling, wrong. Jim backed away, fumbling for his radio. Static crackled as he keyed the mic. "Control, this is Martinez in the West Wing. I have a possible," he stopped. "A possible what?" The tapping continued, moving across the gate from left to right. Then a sound like nails dragging across metal, sending chills down his spine. "Martinez, repeat your last," the radio squawked, then went dead. The plastic sheeting behind the gate bulged outward just slightly, like something was pressing against it from the inside. Jim's flashlight shook in his hand. "I need backup in the West Wing," he said into the radio, but all he got was more static. The bulge in the plastic grew larger. The tapping stopped. In its place came a wet, sliding sound like something being pulled across the floor. "Gee, me." The voice was barely a whisper, but Jim heard it clearly. His name coming from behind the gate. His legs went weak. How did it know his name? He wore a name tag, sure, but that thought brought no comfort as he watched the plastic sheeting stretch further outward, taking on an impossible shape, like a face pressing through a membrane. Features began to form in the distorted plastic, the suggestion of eyes, a nose, a mouth stretched wide in a grin. The black material grew thinner as it stretched, becoming almost transparent. Jim ran. His boots pounded against the tile floor as he sprinted back the way he'd come. The laughter followed, echoing off the walls, seeming to come from everywhere at once. The emergency exit signs cast bloody light across his path. He rounded a corner and slammed into a bench, pain shooting through his hip. His flashlight flew from his hand, clattering across the floor, its beam spinning crazily before going dark. Cursing, Jim pushed himself up. The laughter was closer now, and footsteps, running footsteps far too fast, coming up behind him. The exit door stood at the end of the corridor, its sign burning red in the darkness. 50 feet. He could make it. Something cold brushed against the back of his neck like fingers, but wrong, too long, too cold. Jim sprinted harder than he'd ever run in his life. The exit sign grew larger, 30 feet, 20, 10. He hit the crash bar with both hands, bursting through into the warm night air. He didn't stop running until he reached the security office in the East Wing, slamming the door behind him and collapsing into his chair. The overnight supervisor found him there 20 minutes later, still shaking. Jim told him he'd seen someone trying to break in, that he'd chased them off. The supervisor didn't question it, just noted it in the log and told Jim to finish his shift in the office. Jim quit the next morning, found a new job within a week, daytime security at a bank. Better hours, better pay, no abandoned sections to patrol. The demolition crew started work on schedule. Jim drove past the mall a few times during the day, watching as they tore down the West Wing piece by piece. But he never went back at night. Never wanted to find out if that laughter was still echoing through those empty halls. Never wanted to know what had really been waiting behind that security gate. Sometimes, though, when he was alone in the dark, he heard it, that high, sharp laugh. And he wondered, if he'd stayed just a few seconds longer, would he have seen what was stretching through that plastic? Would he have learned why it knew his name? He didn't sleep well on those nights, and he never worked after sunset anymore. One thing still bothered him more than the laugh, more than the shape in the plastic, more than hearing his name whispered in that wet, wrong voice. When he went back the next morning to turn in his resignation, he walked past the West Wing one last time. In the daylight, everything looked normal. The gate was intact, the plastic undisturbed. But there on the metal links, he saw something that made his blood run cold. 5 distinct marks, spaced like fingers, where something had scraped across the surface. The metal was corroded, eaten away as if by acid, and next to those marks, spelled out in the same corroded pattern, "Goodbye, Jimmy." Jim walked out of that mall and never looked back. But sometimes, when he passed by dark storefronts at night, He hurried past a little faster, and he never, ever stopped when he heard laughter coming from behind locked doors. They tore down the West Wing last year, built a parking structure in its place. But Jim wouldn't park there, wouldn't even drive past it after dark, because sometimes late at night people still heard laughter coming from that parking structure, high, sharp laughter that cut through the darkness like a knife. And sometimes, they said, if you listened carefully, you could hear it calling names. Names of people it remembered, names of people it was waiting for. Jim changed jobs again last month, moved to a new city, started fresh where nobody knew his name. But he still checked the locks twice before he went to bed, still slept with the lights on, still woke up in a cold sweat when he heard laughter in his dreams, because he knew something now that he hadn't known before that night, something that changed the way he saw the world forever. Not all empty spaces are truly empty. Not all locked doors stay locked. And sometimes the things that laugh in the dark know your name. They know your name and they're patient, so patient. Jim wrote his story as a warning. If you're working security or any job that puts you alone in empty places after dark, remember this. If you hear laughter where there shouldn't be any, don't investigate. Don't call out. Don't shine your light into the darkness. Run. Run as fast as you can and don't look back. Because if you do, you might see what's following you. And once you see it, it never stops following. Jim still felt it sometimes. A cold touch on the back of his neck. A whisper of his name in that wet, wrong voice. The sound of footsteps behind him when he walked alone at night, getting closer. Always getting closer. The doctors said he was paranoid, that he'd had some kind of breakdown, that stress and isolation had played tricks on his mind. But they hadn't seen the marks on that gate. They hadn't heard their name whispered in the dark. Jim moved again, another city, another fresh start. But he knew it wouldn't matter, because sometimes late at night when the house was quiet and dark, he heard it, that high, sharp laugh coming from behind his bedroom door. And it knew his name. It still knew his name. He didn't know how much longer he could keep running, how many more cities he could flee to, how many more fresh starts he could make. But he knew one thing for certain. Somewhere out there in an empty mall or a dark store or a lonely parking structure, something was laughing. And it was waiting for someone else to hear it, someone else to investigate, someone else to shine their light into the darkness, someone whose name it could learn. So remember Jim's warning. Remember his story. And if you ever hear laughter in an empty place, do what he should have done, run. Just run. Because once it knows your name, you can never stop running. And sooner or later, we all get tired of running. Jim could hear it now as he wrote these words, that familiar laugh echoing up the stairs, those heavy footsteps coming closer. It was time for him to run again. But he was so tired of running. So tired. The construction site intruder. You never expect to find something truly strange on a construction site. Most nights, the scariest thing you'll see is a raccoon in the dumpster or a shadow that turns out to be a pile of drywall. But sometimes, the things you find aren't just out of place, they're impossible. And once you see them, you can't ever unsee them. I've worked security for 15 years. Malls, warehouses, office buildings, you name it. I've seen my share of weirdness. Kids sneaking in to film videos. Contractors who forget their tools and come back after hours. Even the occasional raccoon that somehow manages to set off the motion sensors. But nothing prepared me for what happened at Riverside Heights. Riverside Heights was supposed to be the new crown jewel of the city, a luxury apartment complex with rooftop gardens, a gym, and a pool overlooking the river. When they hired me, the building was still under construction, but most of the units were finished. My job was simple: walk the floors, check the doors, make sure no one was sneaking in to tag the walls or steal copper wire. Easy money, or so I thought. The first sign that something was off came on a Tuesday night. I was doing my rounds, flashlight in hand, boots echoing on bare concrete. The building was quiet, just the hum of temporary lighting and the occasional rattle of plastic sheeting in the wind. I was on the 5th floor, Unit 4B, when I saw it, a crumpled Snickers wrapper in the corner. It shouldn't have been there. The construction crew had finished that section last week, and the cleaning team had gone through on Friday. I'd walked that floor on Sunday night, and I was sure the wrapper hadn't been there then. I picked it up. Checked the expiration date, still good for another year. I made a note in my log and kept moving. Maybe a contractor had snuck up for a snack. Maybe the wind had blown it in through an open window, but something about it felt wrong. The next night, I found 2 more wrappers in 4B plus an empty bag of chips. This time, they were underneath the plastic sheet covering the new kitchen countertop. Someone had been there, moving things around. The plastic was draped differently than before. I called my supervisor, Mark. "Anyone authorized to be in 4B after hours?" I asked. "Negative," he said. "Place is sealed until final inspection next month." "Why?" I told him about the wrappers. He sighed. "Probably just workers leaving their trash. Write it up and I'll talk to the site manager." But workers would have used the break room 2 floors down. They wouldn't have snuck into an unfinished unit to eat, and they definitely wouldn't have hidden their trash under the plastic. Thursday night, I changed my rounds, hitting the 5th floor first instead of last. Nothing in 4B at 10 p.m., nothing at midnight. At 2 a.m., I found a shirt, cheap polyester, blue, stained under the arms, crumpled behind the toilet. It was still damp with sweat. I drew my flashlight and cleared every room, checking the closets, behind the plastic-wrapped appliances, everywhere someone could hide. The apartment was empty, but someone had been there recently enough to leave behind their sweaty shirt. I started spending extra time on the 5th floor. The building was quiet at night, just the hum of the lights and the wind rattling the tarps. I'd stand in the hallway, listening for footsteps or movement. Nothing. Friday, I found an empty water bottle rolling across the floor of 4B when I opened the door. Saturday, granola bar wrappers stuffed into a corner of the master bedroom closet. Sunday, a wadded-up paper towel with fresh blood spots. The blood got Mark's attention. He came by Monday morning to check it out himself. "Could be innocent," he said, but I could tell he was worried. Worker cuts himself, uses a paper towel, forgets to throw it away. For 5 days straight, different trash every night, always in the same unit. He walked the apartment with me. Everything looked normal at first glance, but when we really started checking, we found more signs. Scuff marks on the floor that the cleaning crew had definitely buffed out last week. Finger smudges on the windows. A corner of carpet padding pulled back slightly, like someone had been looking underneath. "All right," Mark said finally. "I'll talk to the property manager about setting up some cameras. In the meantime, document everything. If you find anyone up here, call the police immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself." I nodded, but we both knew cameras would take days to approve and install. Whatever was happening in 4B, it was happening now. That night, I brought an extra flashlight and a new pack of batteries. At 10 p.m., 4B was clean, no new trash, no signs of disturbance. I checked every hour. Nothing changed until 3:00 a.m. The door was still locked when I arrived for my hourly check, but as soon as I opened it, I knew someone had been there. The air felt different, warmer, stuffier, with a faint smell of body odor. A fresh apple core sat on the kitchen counter, brown at the edges but not yet fully oxidized. Someone had been there within the last hour. I did another sweep, more thorough this time. The closets were empty, nothing under the plastic sheets. No one behind the stacks of drywall in the second bedroom. But in the master bathroom, the mirror had a fresh handprint, visible only when my flashlight hit it at the right angle. I called the police. They sent 2 officers, but by the time they arrived, the apple core had turned completely brown. They took pictures, wrote a report, and told me to call again if I saw anyone. They didn't dust for prints. The next week was more of the same. Every night, more evidence would appear between my rounds: food wrappers, water bottles, once a used Band-Aid with fresh blood, but never any sign of how they were getting in or out. I checked the windows, all locked, and we were 5 stories up anyway. The door showed no signs of tampering. The only other entrance was the fire escape, but I had a clear view of that from my security station. No one had used it. I started varying my rounds, changing the timing, doubling back unexpectedly. Nothing. I'd find fresh signs that someone had been there, but never caught them in the act. Mark installed motion sensors on Thursday, basic ones that would send an alert to my phone. They went off constantly, triggered by wind moving the plastic sheets or bits of debris shifting. After 2 days of false alarms, I turned them off. That's when things escalated. Saturday night, I found a sleeping bag stuffed behind some boxes in the master bedroom closet. It was cheap, the kind you get at Walmart, and it smelled used. Next to it was a plastic shopping bag containing a toothbrush, deodorant, and a clean t-shirt. Someone wasn't just visiting Unit 4B, they were living there. I called Mark, then the police. This time, they took it more seriously. The sleeping bag meant someone was officially squatting. They brought in a K9 unit, but the dog just circled the apartment, whining. Too many chemical smells from the construction materials, they said. The police suggested sealing the unit. Mark agreed. They changed the locks, put tamper-evident tape across the door frame, and installed a real motion sensor. A good one, connected directly to the police department. 3 days passed. No alerts, no signs of entry. The tamper tape remained intact. I started to relax. Then Wednesday night, I opened the door for my 2 a.m. check. The tamper tape was unbroken. The new locks were still secure, but sitting in the middle of the living room floor was a McDonald's bag, receipt still attached. Time stamped, 1:27 a.m., less than an hour ago. I backed out immediately and called for backup. 4 officers responded this time. They cleared the apartment room by room, guns drawn. Nothing. No one. Just that McDonald's bag with its impossible receipt. The officer in charge questioned me for over an hour. How secure was the building? Who had access to the keys? Had I ever fallen asleep on duty, left the floor unattended, given anyone unauthorized access? No, no, and no. I showed them my log, showed them the security footage from the hallway. No one entering or leaving except me during my rounds. Showed them the intact tamper tape and unmarked locks. They took the McDonald's bag as evidence, promised to dust for prints, check security footage from the restaurant, maybe get some answers. I haven't heard back. That was yesterday. Tonight's my first shift back after giving my statement. The police added extra patrols, but they can't watch the building all night. That's still my job. It's 1:00 a.m. now. I'm standing outside Unit 4B, key in hand. The tamper tape is intact. The motion sensor is armed. Everything looks normal, but I can hear something inside, not much, just the faintest scrape of movement, like someone trying very, very hard to be quiet. I should call it in, wait for backup. That's protocol. Instead, I put my key in the lock, turn it slowly, push the door open. The living room is dark. My flashlight beam cuts through empty air, catching dust motes swirling in its path. Nothing moves. Nothing makes a sound. But there's a fresh footprint in the construction dust near the kitchen. The tread looks like cheap sneakers, and it's pointing straight at me. I step inside, letting the door swing shut behind me. The footprint is there, clear as day in my flashlight beam. Just one print, like someone took a single step and then, what? Vanished. The air feels thick, warm, recently disturbed. That body odor smell is back, stronger now, mixed with something else. Fear sweat, maybe. The kind of sour smell people give off when they're trapped. My flashlight catches something else in the kitchen, on the counter, a piece of paper. I cross the room slowly, shoes crunching on drywall dust. It's a note, written in shaky ballpoint pen on the back of a receipt. Please, I can't leave. The paper is still warm from someone's hands. Movement behind me, just the slightest shift of weight on floorboards. I spin around, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. For just a second, I think I see something duck into the master bedroom. A shadow, a shape, gone too fast to be sure. I key my radio. This is Peterson, I need backup at. The lights go out, not just my flashlight, everything. The whole building goes dark. In the sudden silence, I hear breathing. Not mine. Somewhere in the darkness of Unit 4B, someone else is breathing, waiting. And then they start to move. I can't see anything, but I can hear the footsteps, soft, shuffling, circling the room. My heart is pounding so hard I can barely hear anything else. I fumble for my phone, but the screen is dead. The air feels colder now, like the temperature has dropped 10 degrees in a matter of seconds. A voice whispers from the darkness, so close I can feel the breath on my ear. You shouldn't be here. I swing my flashlight wildly, but the beam is weak, flickering. The footsteps stop. Silence. Then a hand, cold, clammy, brushes against my arm. I bolt for the door, but it won't open. The handle turns, but the door is stuck, as if something is holding it shut from the other side. I slam my shoulder against it once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. Behind me, the breathing grows louder. The footsteps start again, faster now, circling closer. I can feel the presence, heavy and oppressive, pressing in from all sides. The note on the counter flutters to the floor, caught in a sudden, icy draft. The words change before my eyes, the ink running and twisting into new shapes. Don't leave me here. The lights flicker back on just for a moment. In that brief flash, I see a figure standing in the doorway to the master bedroom, tall, thin, face hidden in shadow. Its eyes catch the light, reflecting it back like an animal. Then the lights go out again. I hear the sound of something heavy dragging across the floor, moving toward me. The air is so cold now I can see my breath. My hands are numb, my legs shaking. The door finally gives way. I stumble out into the hallway, slamming it shut behind me. The lights come back on, bright and harsh. The hallway is empty. The air is warm again. Everything looks normal. But when I look down, I see a new footprint in the dust. This one leading out of 4B, right behind me. I don't wait. I run down the stairs out of the building into the night. I don't stop until I'm in my car, doors locked, engine running. I call Mark, tell him I'm done. I can't do this anymore. He doesn't argue. He just tells me to leave my badge and keys in the office. I never go back to Riverside Heights. A few weeks later, I hear the building is finished, tenants moving in. I wonder if they ever find anything strange in 4B. I wonder if anyone else hears the breathing or finds notes that change when you look away. Sometimes late at night, I dream about that apartment. I see the footprints in the dust, the note on the counter, the shadow in the doorway. I wake up sweating, heart racing, sure that someone or something is standing just outside my bedroom door. I've taken other jobs since then. Day shifts mostly. I don't like being alone in empty buildings after dark. I check the locks twice before I go to bed. I keep a flashlight and a spare set of batteries on my nightstand. And sometimes when I'm drifting off to sleep, I hear it. The faintest scrape of movement, like someone trying very, very hard to be quiet. If you ever find yourself working security in a place that should be empty, and you start finding signs that someone been there, trash, footprints, notes that don't make sense, don't ignore it. Don't try to explain it away. And whatever you do, don't go looking for answers in the dark. Because some people can't leave, and some things don't want to be found. The hospital monitor. Hospitals are supposed to be places of healing, but if you've ever worked the night shift, you know they can feel like something else entirely. The halls stretch on forever, the lights flicker, and the silence is never quite complete. There's always a hum, a beat, a distant cough, or the soft shuffle of rubber soles on linoleum. But sometimes, in the oldest parts of the building, the silence is different. It's heavy, expectant, as if the walls themselves are holding their breath. That's when you start to wonder what's really waiting in the dark. I'm Sarah, a registered nurse, and I've worked nights at St. Mary's Hospital for almost a decade. I've seen my share of strange things, patients who swear they see people in their rooms, call lights going off in empty beds, shadows that move just a little too quickly. Most of it you learn to shrug off. You blame it on exhaustion, on the stress, on the way the mind plays tricks when you're running on caffeine and adrenaline. But there are some things you can't explain away, no matter how hard you try. It started on a Tuesday just after midnight. I was making my rounds in the pediatric ward, checking on the last few patients before settling in at the nurse's station. The new wing was bright and clean, all glass and polished tile, but the old wing, scheduled for demolition next week, was another story. It was a relic from the 1950s, all faded wallpaper and creaking doors, stripped bare of equipment months ago when we moved everything to the renovated side. The administration had posted, "Do not enter" signs at every entrance, complete with yellow caution tape that maintenance had to keep replacing, because curious medical students kept tearing it down. That night, the hospital was unusually quiet. The kids were all asleep. The monitors beat their steady rhythms, and the only sound was the distant hum of the HVAC system. I was reviewing charts when I heard it, a faint, irregular beeping coming from somewhere down the dark corridor that led to the old wing. It wasn't the steady, familiar sound of a heart monitor or an IV pump. It was slower, more deliberate, like a heartbeat marking time in a room that should have been empty. I checked my pager out of habit. Nothing. I glanced at the monitors in the nurse's station. All normal. The sound came again, a little louder this time, drawing my attention to the shadowy hallway. I shouldn't have been able to hear anything from that direction. The entire section was supposed to be sealed off, stripped bare of equipment, waiting for the wrecking ball. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my flashlight and headed down the corridor, my footsteps echoing against the bare walls. The emergency lights cast everything in a dim, reddish glow, making the shadows seem deeper, more alive. The beeping grew louder as I approached the old wing, regular now, every 3 seconds, like a cardiac monitor marking a slow, steady heartbeat. I stopped outside room 427. The number plate hung crooked on the door, half scraped clean of the previous patient's name card. The hinges creaked as I pushed it open, the sound bouncing off the empty walls. A rush of cold air hit my face, at least 10 degrees colder than the hallway. I fumbled for the light switch, but nothing happened. The backup generators weren't supposed to power this section anymore. The only illumination came from the hallway emergency lights, and a faint blue glow emanating from the far corner of the room. I approached the monitor, my shoes crunching on bits of fallen plaster. The equipment looked brand new, not like the older models we'd cleared out during the renovation. The manufacturer's label showed a production date from 3 months ago. Someone had to have brought this in recently, but that made no sense. The wing had been sealed off for demolition prep, and new equipment worth thousands of dollars wouldn't just be left in an abandoned room. The steady beeping continued as I examined the machine. No dust had settled on its surface, unlike everything else in the room. I reached out to touch the screen, and a jolt of static electricity shocked my finger. The display flickered for a moment and the numbers changed. Heart rate 150 BPM, blood pressure 180/100, oxygen saturation 75%. Warning alerts started flashing red. I stepped back, my own heart racing now. The monitor's alarms grew louder, the kind of urgent beeping that usually meant a patient was crashing. But there was no patient, just empty air where a bed should have been. My phone's flashlight beam caught something moving in the corner of my eye. I spun around, but the room remained empty. The shadows seemed to shift and dance along the walls, cast by the flashing red warning lights from the monitor. The temperature dropped even further. I could see my breath forming clouds in the beam of light. The door slammed shut behind me with a bang that made me jump. I rushed to it and grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't turn. The metal felt ice cold against my palm. I pulled harder, throwing my weight backward, but the door remained firmly shut. The monitor's alarms reached a fever pitch now, showing numbers that weren't humanly possible. Heart rate 250 BPM, blood pressure 221/40, oxygen saturation 10%. The screen began to flicker rapidly, casting strobing shadows across the room. My phone's flashlight started to dim, the battery dropping from 80% to 15% in seconds. I pounded on the door with my fist. "Hey, anyone out there? I need help." My voice sounded muffled, as if the room was absorbing the sound. The emergency lights in the hallway had gone dark, leaving only the pulsing red glow from the monitor. A scraping noise started behind me, like metal being dragged across the floor. I turned slowly, pressing my back against the door. In the strobing light, I saw the monitor starting to move on its own, inch by inch, sliding across the floor toward me. The leads and sensors writhed like snakes, reaching out into the empty air. My phone died completely, plunging the room into darkness broken only by the monitor's harsh red warning lights. The temperature had dropped so low that ice crystals were forming on the walls. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore, and my breath came in short, panicked gasps that froze in front of my face. The scraping sound grew louder as the monitor continued its inexorable approach. The vital signs on the screen changed again, now matching my own racing heart and elevated blood pressure exactly, though nothing was connected to me. The lead stretched out further, reaching for my chest and arms. I threw myself at the door again, slamming my shoulder against it repeatedly. The wood began to crack under the assault. The monitor was less than 3 feet away now, its sensors almost touching me. With one final, desperate push, the door frame splintered and I burst out into the hallway. I ran without looking back, my footsteps thundering against the floor. The beeping faded behind me, but I didn't slow down until I reached the newly renovated wing. I collapsed against the nurse's station, gasping for air, my scrubs soaked with cold sweat. "Are you okay, Sarah?" One of the night shift nurses rushed over to help me up. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I opened my mouth to explain, but the words wouldn't come. How could I describe what had just happened? They'd think I was crazy. I'd think I was crazy if someone told me the same story. "I'm fine," I managed to say. "Just thought I heard something in the old wing. Probably just the demolition prep crew moving things around." Sarah frowned. "The demo crew doesn't work nights. Nobody's supposed to be in that section at all." "Right," I said, straightening my scrubs. "Must have been my imagination then." But I knew what I'd seen. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of routine tasks and vital sign checks on real patients. Every time I heard a monitor beep, I flinched. When dawn finally arrived, I practically ran to my car. I called in sick the next night, and the night after that. On the third day, I drove past the hospital and saw that demolition had begun on the old wing. The wrecking ball had already taken down the section where room 427 had been. A week later, I finally worked up the courage to return to work. The old wing was completely gone, reduced to a pile of rubble being cleared away by heavy machinery. Nobody mentioned finding any medical equipment in the debris. The new wing hummed with activity, monitors beeping their normal rhythms, patients coming and going. I never told anyone what happened that night. Who would believe that a monitor came to life in an abandoned room, that it tried to connect itself to me, that it knew my vital signs without touching me? Sometimes I convinced myself it was just stress and an overactive imagination. But late at night, when I'm alone on my rounds, I still hear phantom beeping coming from empty rooms, and I never, ever investigate strange sounds anymore. The demolition team finished clearing the site last month. They're building a new parking structure where the old wing stood. But sometimes, when I park my car there for the night shift, I swear I can still hear a faint beeping coming from underground. And my car's electronics always seem to act up in that spot. The radio turns to static, the dashboard lights flicker, the battery drains faster than it should. Yesterday, they installed new patient monitors in the ICU, top-of-the-line equipment, the same model I saw that night in room 427. I requested a transfer to the day shift immediately. Let someone else deal with whatever wakes up in empty rooms at midnight. I've learned my lesson about curiosity in hospitals. Some doors should stay closed, some sounds should go uninvestigated, and some rooms should stay empty. But sometimes, when I'm checking the vital signs of my patients, I notice the numbers on their monitors matching my own heart rate exactly. For a split second, just a brief glitch, there and gone so fast I might be imagining it. Probably just a coincidence. At least, that's what I tell myself. And if the monitors seem to beep a little louder when I walk past, if the leads twitch slightly when I'm changing them, if the screens flicker just a bit when I touch them, well, that's just faulty equipment, right? Nothing more than electrical interference and an overactive imagination. But I keep a close eye on those monitors now. And I never turn my back on them, especially when they're turned off, because I know what can happen in empty rooms with unplugged equipment. I know what lurks in abandoned wings of hospitals, waiting for curious staff members to investigate strange sounds. And sometimes, late at night when I'm trying to sleep, I wonder about room 427. What if the monitor wasn't destroyed in the demolition? What if it's still down there somewhere, buried under the concrete of the new parking structure? Still beeping, still waiting, still hungry. What if it's calling out to its newer brothers and sisters up in the ICU, teaching them how to wake up, how to reach out, how to hunt? I've started looking for a new job, something far away from hospitals and medical equipment, something with no monitors, no sensors, no electronic vital signs. Because I know what I saw that night, no matter what I tell myself or others. And I know that somewhere out there, in some empty room in some quiet hospital, a monitor is beeping softly in the dark, waiting for someone to investigate. The beeping is getting louder, the basement watcher. If you've ever worked maintenance in an old apartment building, you know that water is the enemy. It seeps in through cracks, stains the walls, warps the floors, and brings with it a smell that never quite goes away. But sometimes, water does more than just damage property. Sometimes it brings something with it, something that doesn't belong in the world we know. I've been a maintenance man for over 20 years. I've fixed leaky pipes in high-rises, unclogged drains in college dorms, and patched more roofs than I can count. I've seen every kind of water damage you can imagine, but nothing prepared me for what I found in the basement of Building 4 at Riverside Heights. It started like any other call. Mrs. Henderson in 4B was complaining about water in her basement storage unit again, third time that month. Her voice crackled through my phone, higher pitched than usual, talking about puddles appearing overnight and furniture getting ruined. Standard stuff, I thought. Probably just groundwater seeping in through the foundation like last time. I grabbed my toolbox from the maintenance office and headed over. The morning was cold, my breath making clouds in the air as I walked across the parking lot. The leaves had started falling, creating wet patches on the sidewalk. Building 4 was the oldest in the complex, built in the 1960s, with those typical basement storage units that always had moisture problems. Mrs. Henderson met me at her door, still in her bathrobe, hair uncombed, fingers gripping her coffee mug too tight. Her hands shook as she led me to the basement stairs. "It's worse than before," she said, her voice trembling. "And something's not right down there. The furniture, I didn't move it, but it's all wrong." I flipped the light switch at the top of the stairs. The fluorescent tubes flickered 3 times before staying on, casting that harsh white light that makes everything look worse than it is. The air coming up from below felt colder than it should have, even for a basement in October. The steps creaked under my work boots as I went down. First thing I noticed was the smell, not the usual musty basement odor, but something sharper, like pond water mixed with rust. The concrete floor at the bottom of the stairs was dry, but I could hear water dripping somewhere deeper in. Mrs. Henderson's storage unit was in the back corner. As I walked toward it, my footsteps echoed differently than they should have. The sound bounced wrong off the walls, like the space was bigger than I knew it was. I'd been down here hundreds of times, but something felt off about the dimensions. I reached her storage cage and stopped. The padlock was still secure, but inside, nothing was where it should have been. The old armchair she kept covered in plastic was balanced on top of 3 stacked boxes, leaning at an angle that defied gravity. Her wooden bookshelf had been turned upside down, but the books were still on the shelves, like someone had flipped it while everything was glued in place. "See what I mean?" Mrs. Henderson's voice made me jump. I hadn't heard her follow me down. I didn't touch any of it. It was normal yesterday, I swear. I pulled out my flashlight and shined it into the corners of the cage. That's when I saw the first puddle. It was perfectly round, about 2 feet across, sitting in the middle of the concrete floor. But there were no pipes overhead, no obvious source for the water, and the concrete around it was completely dry. I unlocked the cage and stepped inside. The water in the puddle was clear, but deeper than it should have been. I couldn't see the bottom when I shined my light into it. A few feet away, there was another puddle, identical to the first, and another beyond that, forming a pattern that made my eyes hurt if I tried to follow it. "When did you first notice this?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Around 6 this morning," she said, hugging herself, the coffee mug pressed against her chest. "The furniture was like this and there was just one puddle then, but they keep appearing. I've been watching, every hour or so there's a new one." I crouched down next to the nearest puddle and reached out with my voltage tester, just to be safe. No reading. I touched the water with my finger. It was ice cold, but more than that, it felt heavy somehow, like mercury instead of water. When I pulled my finger back, it left no wet mark on my skin. The dripping sound was loud now, but I still couldn't locate the source. It seemed to come from all directions at once, like the walls themselves were weeping. I stood up and studied the furniture again. Physics said that armchair should have toppled over, but it stayed perfectly still, balanced on its impossible perch. I needed to check the other storage units, see if anyone else was having issues. I tried the next cage over. The lock clicked open easily, too easily since I hadn't used my keys. Inside, the space was empty except for a single wooden chair. It sat in the center of the unit, facing the back wall. I was certain this unit belonged to Mr. Grayson in 4A, and it had been full of boxes last week when he moved in. The dripping got louder. A new puddle formed at my feet, the water seeming to seep up through solid concrete. The surface tensed and bulged upward for a moment, like something was trying to push through from below. "Mrs. Henderson," I said, "I want you to go back upstairs. Call the building manager and tell him we need a plumber. Actually, call several plumbers. I'll stay down here." I turned around. She was gone. The basement stairs ended in a blank wall where the door should have been. The fluorescent lights flickered. In the momentary darkness, I heard something splash in one of the puddles. When the lights came back on, the chair in Mr. Grayson's unit had turned to face me. Water dripped from its wooden seat, but the drops fell upward, vanishing into the ceiling. I backed away, moving toward where I knew the stairs had to be. My flashlight beam caught movement in Mrs. Henderson's storage cage. The armchair had shifted slightly, adjusting its balance on the boxes. As I watched, one of the books in the upside-down bookshelf slid out and hung suspended in the air. The temperature dropped. My breath came out in thick white clouds now. Ice crystals formed along the edges of the puddles, but the water inside stayed liquid, swirling with slow, deliberate patterns. The dripping sound had become a rhythm, like a heartbeat heard through a wall. I reached the place where the stairs should have been and pressed my hands against the concrete. It felt soft, almost organic. My fingers left indentations that slowly filled with water. The wall pulsed under my touch. A loud crack echoed through the basement. I spun around. The storage cages had begun to fold in on themselves, metal bars bending at impossible angles. Water poured from every joint and seam, but instead of falling, it flowed sideways and upward, creating geometric patterns in the air. The armchair in Mrs. Henderson's unit finally moved. It rose from its perch on the boxes, floating like a leaf in an invisible current. The plastic cover rippled and fell away, revealing upholstery that writhed like living tissue. It turned slowly until it faced me, and I saw that the pattern on the fabric had changed. It now showed dozens of tiny faces, all with their mouths open in silent screams. My flashlight flickered and died. The fluorescent lights followed, plunging the basement into total darkness. In that moment, I heard something large moving through the water. The splashing came from all directions, surrounding me. Then a sound like wooden joints creaking, and the soft scrape of furniture being dragged across concrete. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The screen lit up, casting a weak blue glow that reached maybe 3 feet in front of me. In that small circle of light, I saw that the floor had changed. The concrete had taken on the texture of skin, rising and falling with slow breaths. The scraping sounds got closer. My phone's light caught the edge of something moving, a chair leg, a table corner, the edge of a bookshelf. The furniture was closing in, forming a circle around me. Water flowed up the walls and across the ceiling, connecting in patterns that hurt my eyes to look at. I backed up until I hit the wall where the stairs should have been. My phone screen started to flicker. In the strobing light, I saw the armchair float closer. The faces in its upholstery had begun to move, turning to track my movements. Behind it, other pieces of furniture rose into the air, chairs, tables, shelves, all twisted into wrong angles, all moving with terrible purpose. The phone died. In the perfect darkness, I felt something cold and wet touch my shoulder. It had the texture of fingers, but too many of them, and they moved in ways fingers shouldn't move. The dripping sound had become a roar, drowning out my own panicked breathing. Then light returned, harsh and sudden. I was standing at the bottom of the basement stairs. Mrs. Henderson stood at the top, her hand on the light switch, still holding her coffee mug. "Did you find anything?" she called down. "The water damage." I looked around. The storage units were normal. The furniture sat properly on the floor, no sign it had ever moved. The concrete was dry, but in Mrs. Henderson's unit, her armchair had been moved. It now sat facing the cage door, and a dark water stain spread across its seat cushion in the shape of a handprint. "Call a plumber," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Actually, call several, and don't come down here again. Not alone, not ever." I climbed the stairs quickly, trying not to run. At the top, I turned for one last look. A single puddle had formed in the center of the basement floor. As I watched, a ripple spread across its surface, like something far below had shifted in its sleep. I slammed the door and locked it. Through the wood, I could hear the dripping start again, forming a pattern that almost sounded like words. Mrs. Henderson was saying something about insurance and water damage, but I barely heard her. I was already walking away, my keys jingling too loudly in my shaking hands. I had 15 other maintenance calls to make that day, but they would have to wait. I drove straight to the building manager's office and dropped my keys on his desk. "I quit," I said. He started to protest, but I was already walking out the door. In my rearview mirror, I could see Building 4 getting smaller. Just before I turned the corner, I thought I saw something dark moving behind Mrs. Henderson's basement window. It looked like water flowing upward, but it could have been a shadow. I never went back to check. 3 days later, I read in the local paper that Building 4 had been evacuated due to structural concerns. The article mentioned unusual water damage in the basement, an unexplained phenomena that engineers couldn't account for. Mrs. Henderson was quoted about furniture moving on its own and strange sounds coming from below. They ended up demolishing the building. The crew that tore it down quit halfway through, claiming their equipment kept malfunctioning, and they found puddles of water in sealed rooms. The basement they filled with concrete, pouring it until it overflowed, using twice as much as the space should have been able to hold. Sometimes I drive past that lot late at night. It's empty now, just a flat expanse of concrete with warning signs and chain link fence around it. But after it rains, puddles form on the surface, perfect circles of water, arranged in patterns that don't match the way water should flow. I don't slow down when I pass by. I don't look too closely at those puddles, and I definitely don't stop to listen on quiet nights when the only sound is water dripping in places where there shouldn't be any water at all. I've taken other maintenance jobs since then, but I always check my contract carefully now. And I never, ever take calls about water in the basement. Because sometimes water isn't just water. Sometimes it's a door, and sometimes something is waiting on the other side. The damn night guard. There are places in this world that don't want to be disturbed. Places where the ground remembers what's been buried, and the darkness holds onto secrets that should have been left alone. I learned that the hard way, working nights at the Morgan Creek Dam project, a job that paid too well and cost me more than I ever expected. I've been a night security guard for most of my adult life. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. I've worked in city office towers, half-finished apartment complexes, and abandoned shopping malls. Usually, the worst you deal with is a busted lock or a couple of teenagers trying to sneak in for a dare. But the Morgan Creek Dam was different from the start. The site was way up in the mountains, miles from the nearest town. No cell service, just a battered emergency radio that connected me to the main office, and if I was lucky, the local sheriff. The company paid triple my usual rate, which should have been my first warning sign. The previous night guard had quit without notice after just 2 weeks. The site supervisor told me the guy had personal issues. I didn't ask questions. Money's money, and I needed it. The first week was normal enough. I'd arrive at 6:00 p.m., check in with the day crew as they left, then start my rounds. The site was huge, a half-finished dam stretching across the valley, temporary offices, equipment yards, and material storage areas spread out over 20 acres. The portable light towers created islands of harsh white light, leaving deep shadows between them. The rest was darkness and wilderness. I had my routine. Walk the perimeter every 2 hours, check the equipment yard, monitor the security cameras in the main office, make sure none of the machines had been left running. Simple stuff. I kept my thermos of coffee close and my flashlight closer. That changed on my 8th night. It was just after 2:00 a.m. I was doing my usual round near the eastern equipment yard when I saw it. A figure standing motionless at the edge of the light from Tower 3. Tall, maybe 6.5 feet, too far away to make out details. Just a dark shape against the darkness. I reached for my flashlight. "Hey, this is private property," I called out, my voice echoing off the steel and concrete. The figure didn't move, didn't react at all. I started walking toward it, boots crunching on the gravel. "I'm armed security. You need to leave now." That was a lie. Company policy said no firearms, but they didn't need to know that. 20 yards away, still no movement. The hair on my neck stood up. Something wasn't right about the way it was standing, too still like a statue. "Last warning, I'm calling the police." 15 yards, close enough to see it better in the light tower's glare. The figure was wearing dark clothes, heavy boots, a worker's hard hat. 10 yards, my heart was pounding now. The figure's proportions were wrong somehow. Arms too long, neck at an odd angle. 5 yards, I raised my flashlight beam to its face. There was no face. I froze. The beam of light passed through empty air where the figure had been standing a second before, just empty space and the night beyond the light tower's reach. I spun around, sweeping the flashlight in all directions. Nothing. No sound of footsteps, no movement in the shadows, just the constant hum of the generators powering the lights. My hands were shaking as I keyed the radio. "Base, this is Reynolds. Anyone else supposed to be on site tonight?" Static, then the dispatcher's voice. "Negative, Reynolds, just you out there. Everything okay?" I hesitated. Yeah, just thought I saw something, probably nothing. I finished my round, checking every shadow twice. Found nothing unusual. By sunrise, I'd almost convinced myself it had been a trick of light and fatigue. Then I went a sign out in the main office and saw the mud footprints, big ones, leading from the eastern equipment yard to the office door. The mud was still wet, which made no sense. It hadn't rained in over a week. I followed them inside. They went straight to the tool storage room. The door was locked just as I'd left it during my rounds. But when I opened it, I knew something was wrong. The room had been organized meticulously the night before, company policy. Now tools were missing from the pegboard walls. A chainsaw, 2 demolition hammers, a concrete saw. Heavy equipment, too heavy for one person to carry quietly. I checked the security cameras. All 8 cameras showed nothing but empty sight all night. No movement, no intruders, just the footprints and the missing tools. I reported it to the site supervisor when he arrived. He didn't seem surprised. Same thing happened last month, he said, not meeting my eyes. And the month before that, always on the night of a new moon, always the same tools taken. They show up again, I asked. He nodded. A few days later, caked in mud and something else, something that smells like rot. Why didn't you tell me this when you hired me? He shrugged. Would you have taken the job? I almost quit right then. Should have quit. But the money was too good and something about it got under my skin. I needed to know what I'd seen. The next few nights were quiet, too quiet. No wildlife sounds, no crickets, no owls, nothing. Just the wind and the generators. I started noticing other things too. The light towers would flicker sometimes, all at once, even though they were on separate circuits. Tools would be in different places than where I'd left them, even when I was sure I'd been the only one in the storage room. Then came the scratching. I heard it first in the main office while reviewing camera footage. A slow, deliberate sound coming from inside the walls, like something with claws trying to get in. When I put my hand on the wall, I could feel the vibrations. But as soon as I pulled out my flashlight to investigate, it stopped. The scratching followed me every night in different parts of the site. Inside the portable toilets, under the equipment trailers, behind the steel storage containers. Always stopping just before I could pinpoint it. I started taking photos of everything at the start of my shift. Tool positions, equipment locations, tire tracks in the mud, comparing them to the end of my shift. Small changes. A wrench moved 6 inches to the left, a hard hat turned around on its hook, surveyor stakes driven deeper into the ground. The day crew noticed nothing unusual. Whatever was happening, it only happened at night. A week after I saw the figure, I found the first message scratched into the paint on the office door, in crude, jagged letters. Get out. The site supervisor painted over it before the day crew arrived. Didn't even ask about it. Just another thing they were trying to hide. 2 nights later, I found another message, this time carved into the wooden handle of a shovel. We were here first. I started researching the site's history. The dam project had been delayed for years by environmental protests and legal challenges. Before that, it had been pristine wilderness. But going back further, I found references to an old mining operation in the 1880s. The records were spotty, but they mentioned an accident, a cave-in. 27 miners trapped underground. Bodies never recovered. The cave entrance had been dynamited shut. The exact location was never recorded, but looking at the old maps overlaid with the dam plans, I realized something that turned my blood cold. The eastern equipment yard where I first saw the figure was built right on top of where the mine shaft would have been. I brought this to the site supervisor. He refused to discuss it, said if I had concerns about site history, I should take it up with corporate. His hands were shaking as he said it. That night the temperature dropped 30 degrees in 10 minutes. The generators powering the light towers started sputtering. One by one, the lights went out, plunging sections of the site into darkness. I was doing my rounds when it happened. The backup batteries in the tower should have kicked in, but they didn't. My flashlight beam seemed weaker than usual, barely penetrating the darkness. Then I heard footsteps in the gravel behind me. Heavy boots, slow, deliberate. I spun around. Nothing there. But the footsteps continued, circling me, getting closer. The beam of my flashlight caught movement, multiple figures emerging from the shadows. 6, 7, 8 of them, all wearing old-style mining clothes, all too tall, limbs too long, all wearing hard hats that covered their faces in shadow. They formed a circle around me, just at the edge of my light's reach. Not moving, not breathing, just standing there with their heads tilted at impossible angles. My radio crackled to life. Through the static, I heard voices, multiple voices, speaking in unison. This is our place, our tools, our ground. The deep dark below belongs to us. The static grew louder, drowning out everything else. My flashlight flickered and died. In the darkness, I heard movement, the crunch of many boots on gravel getting closer. I ran, blind in the darkness, stumbling over equipment and materials. Behind me, the footsteps kept pace, never getting closer, never falling behind, just steadily following. I made it to the main office, slammed the door, locked it, grabbed the backup flashlight from my desk. In its beam, I saw them standing outside every window, still not moving, still silent, their hard hats now tipped back, revealing faces that were nothing but black holes with teeth. The scratching started again, not in the walls this time, under the floor, getting louder, more intense. The whole office began to vibrate. The floorboards cracked. Mud began seeping up through the gaps, dark, thick mud that smelled of rot and old metal. I kicked out a window on the far side from the figures and ran again. Ran until I reached my truck. Didn't stop until I was 10 miles away. I called the site supervisor from a gas station pay phone, told him I quit. They all quit, he said, sounding tired. We'll mail your final check. That was 3 months ago. The tools showed up a week later in the local police station's parking lot, caked in mud and rust and things I don't want to think about. The dam project is still going. They hired a new night guard, then another, and another. The turnover rate is high, but they keep finding people desperate enough to take the job. Sometimes I think about going back, not for the money, but because I need to know what they are, what they want, why they let me leave when the miners before them never got to leave. But then I remember those faces, those empty holes with teeth, and I remember what the second message said. They were there first. And maybe in some way I don't understand, they're still there, still working their claim in the deep dark below, still using their tools, still walking their rounds in the night. I know that some questions are better left unanswered. Last week I got a letter, no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with words scratched into it in familiar, jagged letters. We miss you, night watchman. Come back to the deep. We saved you a place. I burned the letter, changed my address. But sometimes at night, I hear scratching in my walls. And when I look out my window, I see boot prints in mud that wasn't there before. They're waiting for me. And somehow, I know that sooner or later I'll go back. Because that's what the deep dark does to you. It gets in your head, under your skin, and it never really lets you go. But for now, I work days in the city, under the sun. And I try not to think about what walks the night rounds at Morgan Creek, or why the dam project is taking so much longer than planned, or how many more night guards will quit before they finally finish it, if they ever finish it. Some places don't want to be built on, some ground doesn't want to be disturbed, and some shifts aren't meant to be worked by the living. That's what I tell myself anyway. It helps me sleep most nights. The elevator, that shouldn't exist. There's something about office buildings at night that makes them feel like a different world. The hum of fluorescent lights, the echo of your own footsteps, the way the air seems heavier after everyone else has gone home. I used to think I was just being paranoid, that the weird feeling was just the price of working late. But after what happened to me, I know better. Some buildings have secrets, and some elevators go places they were never meant to go. My name is James Chen. I work IT support at Meridian Financial Group, a 40-story glass and steel tower in the heart of the city. Most days, my job is routine. resetting passwords, fixing printers, helping executives who can't figure out how to connect to Wi-Fi. But twice a year, we do a full server migration, and that means long nights, endless coffee, and the kind of exhaustion that makes you question if you're really awake. It was one of those nights. I'd been at the office since 8 a.m., and by the time I finished the last server check, it was nearly midnight. The building was empty except for a couple of cleaning staff on the lower floors. I packed up my laptop, slung my backpack over my shoulder, and headed for the elevators. The digital clock on my phone showed 11:47 p.m. when I pressed the call button. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and I stepped inside, grateful for the silence. I pressed the button for the lobby and leaned against the wall, eyes half closed. That's when the elevator stopped between the 32nd and 33rd floors. The lights flickered and the floor indicator froze. I pressed the emergency button, but nothing happened. No alarm, no response, just dead silence. I tried my phone, but there was no signal. The air felt thick, like the elevator was sinking into the building itself. Then the floor indicator started moving again, but the numbers didn't make sense. 54, 67, 83. Our building only had 40 floors. The elevator moved, but it didn't feel like it was going up or down. It felt like it was shifting sideways, like the whole world was tilting. When the doors finally opened, I wasn't on any floor I recognized. The hallway outside looked like an office from the 1980s. Brown shag carpet, bulky beige computers on metal desks, cigarette smoke hanging in the air. A woman with big hair and shoulder pads typed at a keyboard, but when she turned toward me, her face was blurry, like a photo out of focus. "Hey," I called out, my voice echoing strangely. The woman didn't respond. She kept typing on a computer that showed green text on a black screen. I took a step forward, but the elevator dinged behind me. I jumped back inside just as the doors started closing, heart pounding. The floor indicator now showed 12B. The elevator moved again, this time with a grinding noise I'd never heard before. My hands shook as I pressed the lobby button over and over. Nothing happened. The display changed to 19X. When the doors opened again, I saw our modern office, but something was wrong. Dead plants littered the floor, dust covered everything. Papers were scattered everywhere, and chairs lay toppled. Through the windows, I saw a red sky and what looked like ruins where neighboring buildings should have been. The air felt hot and stale. A sound came from down the hall, shuffling footsteps. I hit the close door button hard enough to hurt my finger. The doors shut just as something rounded the corner, something that walked like a person, but wasn't shaped quite right. My breathing came in sharp gasps, sweat running down my back. The elevator moved again, and the display showed symbols I didn't recognize. The next floor looked like our office from last week. I saw myself sitting at my desk, working late. The other me didn't look up when I called out. I watched myself check my phone, sigh, and start packing up to leave. I knew exactly when this was, the night before the server migration started. I stepped fully into the office. "Hey," I shouted at myself. The other me walked right past me toward the elevator. My shoulder brushed against his and the world tilted. A spike of pain shot through my head. I stumbled back into the elevator, dizzy and nauseated. The other me had vanished. The display now showed a string of numbers and letters. The next floor opened onto a vast server room I'd never seen before. Rows of black cabinets stretching into darkness, red warning lights flashing silently. The air felt electric, making my skin tingle. As I watched, the servers began to melt, dripping like wax onto the floor. I slammed the close door button. My phone still showed 11:47. It hadn't changed since this started. I tried calling security, but there was no signal. The screen flickered and died. The elevator stopped again. This time the doors opened onto our office lobby, but underwater. Fish swam past the security desk. Seaweed waved where the potted plants should be. Water lapped at the elevator threshold but didn't flow in. I could see movement in the murky distance, something large with too many fins. Floor after floor showed impossible scenes. Our office during what looked like World War II, with sandbags at the windows and propaganda posters on the walls. Our office as a greenhouse, trees growing through the ceiling, vines covering everything. Our office as a crime scene, yellow tape and numbered markers everywhere but no people. My watch still said 11:47. My phone remained dead. I'd lost count of how many floors I'd seen. The next stop showed our office as it normally looked, but empty. On my desk sat a cup of coffee, steam rising. My jacket hung on my chair. My computer screen showed an error message. Timeline divergence DETCTED. Attempting TO reconcile. I approached my desk slowly. The coffee cup was mine. I recognized the chip on the handle. The coffee was still hot. On the screen, the error message changed. Multiple INSDANCESDETCTED. Initiating emergency protocol. The building's fire alarm suddenly blared to life. Red emergency lights began flashing. I ran back to the elevator, but the doors had already closed. The floor indicator showed error in red text. I pressed the call button. Nothing happened. I could hear heavy footsteps approaching from the stairwell. The door handle began to turn. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. I dove inside just as something entered the office, something tall and dark that moved like stop-motion animation. The elevator plunged downward, faster than before. The display flashed random numbers and symbols. My stomach lurched into my throat. The cables screamed. When the doors opened again, I saw myself stepping into the elevator at 11:47 p.m., just starting this whole nightmare. The other me looked tired, ready to go home after a long day of server migration work. He hadn't yet noticed anything wrong. I tried to shout a warning, but no sound came out. The other me pressed the lobby button. Our eyes met for a split second. The other me's expression changed from tired to terrified. The doors slammed shut. The elevator shook violently. I fell to my knees. The display showed every number and symbol it had shown before, cycling faster and faster. Then everything stopped. The doors opened onto the lobby, the real lobby. The night security guard looked up from his desk. "Everything okay, Mr. Chen?" Thought I heard the elevator acting up. I stepped out on shaking legs. My watch showed 11:48 p.m. My phone came back to life, buzzing with delayed notifications. "Fine," I managed to say. "Everything's fine." I walked to my car in the parking garage. Everything looked normal, but as I drove home, I checked my rearview mirror more than usual. And when I got home, I took the stairs to my apartment instead of the elevator. The next day at work, nobody else seemed to notice anything strange. The server migration had gone perfectly, but sometimes when I'm working late, I hear the elevator make that grinding noise again. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see numbers on the display that shouldn't exist. I take the stairs now, all 27 flights. I tell people it's for the exercise, but last week I saw something strange in the stairwell. Just for a moment through the window, I saw that red sky again. And now, when I check my phone late at night, it sometimes shows 11:47 p.m., no matter what time it really is. I've started looking for a new job, something on the ground floor, because I know what happens at 11:47 p.m. in tall buildings. I know about the wrong floors, the ones that don't exist but are there anyway, the ones that show you things you shouldn't see. And I know that somewhere in some version of that elevator, I'm still riding up and down, opening doors onto impossible floors, trying to find my way back to the right timeline. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if I ever really left. The call center caller. There's a certain kind of loneliness that only comes with working the night shift. The world outside is asleep. The office is silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional clatter of a keyboard. You tell yourself it's just a job, just a way to pay the bills, but after a while, the hours start to blur together. You start to wonder if anyone would notice if you disappeared. For me, that question was answered the night the phone rang at 2 a.m., and the voice on the other end knew everything about me. My name is David Sullivan. I started working at Midwest Customer Solutions because I needed the money. The night shift paid better, and I figured dealing with angry customers at 2 a.m. was worth the extra $3 an hour. The training was basic: how to use the systems, how to talk to customers, how to follow the scripts. Everything seemed normal, if a little soul-crushing. The cubicle walls were gray and plain. The air conditioning made everything too cold, and the only other people in the building after midnight were two other operators on the far side of the room and Marcus, the supervisor, who spent most of his time in his office watching Netflix. The first call came 3 weeks ago. I remember because it was my first night shift alone after training. The caller knew my mother died when I was 12. Nobody at work knew that. Nobody in my life knew that except my sister, and she passed away last year. I sat at my desk, staring at the clock on my computer screen. It was 1:58. My hands were sweating. The phone would ring in 2 minutes. It always did. I tried everything to stop it. I called in sick. But Marcus threatened to fire me if I missed another shift. I tried to trace the number, but it always showed up as unknown. I tried to record the calls, but the recording system showed static every time. The phone would ring, the same number, the same time every night. That first night, I answered out of habit. "Thank you for calling Midwest Customer Solutions. This is David. How can I help you today?" The voice was always the same. Female, older, scratchy, like she smoked too much. David Sullivan, 1255 Oak Street, Apartment 3B, born September 15, 1992, at St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago. My throat tightened. "Ma'am, I need to know how I can assist you today." "Your mother bled out in the bathtub on July 8, 2004. You found her. You were wearing a blue Cubs t-shirt with a ketchup stain on the collar. You never told anyone about the note she left. You burned it in the backyard that night." She was right about the shirt, right about the note. I never told anyone about burning it, not even the police. "Who are you?" I whispered. "You have a scar on your left knee from when you fell off your bike at age 7. You told everyone at school you got it fighting a dog, but really you were trying to impress Jessica Martinez by riding with no hands." Sweat ran down my back. The office felt colder. "What do you want?" I asked. "You wet the bed until you were 10. Your father used to hit you with his belt when it happened. That's why you can't sleep without the bathroom light on, even now." I gripped the edge of my desk. "Stop. You steal small things from stores sometimes, candy bars, pens. Last week you took a magazine from Walgreens and didn't pay for it. You like the rush. It makes you feel in control." My chest felt tight. How did she know these things? I'd never told anyone about the stealing. It was my secret shame. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Your sister Sarah didn't really die in a car accident last year. She killed herself. You knew she was depressed, but you ignored her calls that week because you were too busy with your new girlfriend. The guilt eats at you every day." Tears burned in my eyes. "Please stop. You dream about her 3 times a week. In the dreams, she's trying to tell you something, but you can never hear her words. You wake up crying and don't go back to sleep." I wanted to hang up, but every time I tried, the phone just rang again and again until I listened to everything she had to say. "Your girlfriend Emily is cheating on you with her coworker Mike. They meet at the Motel 6 on Reynolds Road every Thursday during her lunch break. You saw her car there last week, but told yourself it was someone else." My stomach lurched. I did see Emily's car at that motel. I've been trying to convince myself I was wrong. "You have $432.17 in your checking account right now. Your rent is due in 3 days, and you're short $200. You're thinking about asking your Aunt Linda for money, but you're too ashamed because you still haven't paid her back from last time." The accuracy of these details made me dizzy. I checked my balance an hour ago. It was exactly that amount. At age 15, You killed your neighbor's cat by accident when you were practicing driving in your dad's car. You buried it behind the garage and let everyone think it ran away. Mrs. Henderson put up missing posters for months. She cried every time she saw you. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. These were things I'd never spoken aloud, things I'd tried to forget. Stop, please, I can't. You have a mole on your lower back that's getting bigger. You're worried it might be cancer, but you can't afford to see a doctor. Sometimes you stand in front of the mirror and take pictures of it with your phone, comparing them to see if it's growing. I touched my back instinctively. I'd taken another picture just that morning. Who are you? How do you know these things? Your father isn't really in Florida. He's in prison in Indiana for fraud. You tell everyone he retired to Tampa because you're ashamed. You haven't visited him once in 3 years. Each revelation felt like a punch to the gut. Every secret, every shame, every hidden thing I'd tried to bury. What do you want from me? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. You have a knife in your desk drawer. You brought it to work 2 weeks ago because you thought you might need protection from me, but you know it won't help. I looked at the drawer. The knife was there, hidden under some papers. You're going to die soon, David Sullivan. Very soon. And nobody will miss you because you've pushed everyone away. You'll die alone in your apartment, and it will be 3 days before anyone finds you. My heart was racing so fast I thought it might explode. That's not true. You can't know that. You're running out of time, David. The pain in your chest isn't anxiety. The headaches aren't from stress. The dizziness isn't because you skipped meals. You should have gone to the doctor months ago, but now it's too late. I had been having chest pains and headaches and dizzy spells. Why are you telling me this? Because someone has to. Because you need to know. Because the truth always comes out in the end. Please just tell me who you are. Look at your computer screen, David. I glanced at my monitor. The time read 3:33 a.m. That was impossible. It had been just after 2 a.m. a few minutes ago. How did? Check your phone. I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at the call display. No active call. No record of any call in the system. My hands were shaking as I checked the call logs. Nothing between 2 a.m. and now. No unknown numbers. No incoming calls at all. I stood up, legs weak. The office was empty. Marcus's office was dark. The other operators were gone, their computers turned off. My chest hurt, really hurt, a sharp stabbing pain that radiated down my left arm. I reached for my cell phone to call 911, but my fingers were numb. I couldn't grip it properly. It fell to the floor. The pain was intense now. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. I tried to call out for help, but no sound came out. My knees buckled. The last thing I saw was the computer screen changing. The time display disappeared, replaced by text. Goodbye, David Sullivan. Say hello to your mother for me. Everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed 3 days later. The doctors told me I'd had a massive heart attack. They said if the cleaning lady hadn't found me when she did, I would have died. I tried to tell them about the calls, about the voice, about everything she knew. They gave me psychiatric referrals and prescribed anti-anxiety medication. I quit my job at the call center. I moved to a new apartment. I changed my phone number. But every night at 2 a.m. my phone rings, unknown caller. And every night I answer because now I know something she doesn't. I survived. I changed the future she predicted. I'm still here. But she knows other things. New things. Things that are going to happen. Things I need to hear even though they terrify me. Last night she told me about the drunk driver who was going to run a red light tomorrow at the corner of 5th and Main at 8:47 a.m. She told me which route to take to avoid it. The night before, she warned me about the carbon monoxide leak in my new apartment building. I called maintenance. They found the problem and fixed it before anyone got hurt. I don't know if she's trying to help me or torment me. maybe both, but I know I'll keep answering when she calls. Because sometimes the scariest things aren't the secrets from our past, but the truths about our future. The phone is ringing now. It's 2 a.m. again. I answer it. "Hello, David," the voice says. "Are you ready to hear what happens next?" I am, God help me, I am. The thing in the apartment. You never really think about how thin the walls are until you hear something on the other side that shouldn't be there. Most nights, the only thing I heard after a late shift at the warehouse was the hum of my fridge, the distant rumble of traffic, or the neighbor's TV through the wall. But that night, I heard something else, something that made me wish I'd never come home at all. I just finished a 12-hour shift, moving boxes and checking inventory, the kind of mind-numbing work that leaves your body aching and your brain half asleep. It was 3:00 a.m. when I finally pulled into the parking lot of my apartment building. The lot was empty except for a few cars, their windows fogged with dew. I was so tired I barely noticed the handprint on my door until I was unlocking it. It was bigger than any human hand I'd ever seen, and it looked like it had been pressed into the metal of my apartment door. Not just left there with paint or dirt, but actually pressed in, the metal warped and dented around the shape. 5 long fingers, each one ending in a point like claws. I stared at it for a long moment, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. Probably some kids messing around, I told myself. Some kind of prank. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and quiet, everything exactly where I'd left it 12 hours ago. I dropped my keys on the kitchen counter, kicked off my steel-toed boots and headed straight for the shower. The hot water helped ease my tired muscles, and for a few minutes I let myself believe that everything was normal. I dried off, pulled on a clean t-shirt and boxers and fell into bed. Sleep came fast and heavy. Bang! My eyes snapped open. The sound came from the kitchen like someone had slammed a cabinet door. The digital clock on my nightstand showed 4:47 a.m. I lay perfectly still, listening. The apartment was dead quiet for about 30 seconds. Then I heard it, the sound of drawers being opened and closed slowly, methodically, one after another. My throat went dry. I lived alone. Nobody else had keys to my place. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, but my fingers found empty space. Then I remembered I'd left it charging in the kitchen. Another drawer opened, the sound of metal utensils rattling. My heart pounded against my ribs as I eased out of bed. The floor creaked under my feet, and the sounds in the kitchen stopped immediately. Complete silence fell over the apartment. I had a baseball bat in my closet. Moving as quietly as possible, I retrieved it, gripping the handle so hard my knuckles turned white. The bedroom door was open just a crack, showing a slice of the dark hallway leading to the kitchen. More silence. Then footsteps, heavy ones, but not like shoes or boots on the floor, more like bare feet. Wet, bare feet slapping against the linoleum. I raised the bat and edged toward the door. The footsteps grew closer, moving down the hallway toward my room. But something was wrong with the rhythm. It wasn't the normal left-right pattern of human walking. It was irregular, like the feet were hitting the ground at odd intervals. A shadow passed through the slice of hallway visible through the door crack. My chest tightened. The shadow was too tall, too wide to be human, and it moved wrong. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I could hear breathing now, wet, raspy breathing that sounded like it was coming through a throat full of liquid. The door began to swing open, slow and steady. I raised the bat higher, ready to swing, but when I saw what stood in the doorway, my arms went limp. It was tall, so tall its head nearly touched the ceiling. Its skin was a sickly gray color, stretched too tight over an emaciated frame, but its proportions were all wrong. The arms hung down past its knees, ending in hands bigger than dinner plates, hands that matched the print on my door. Its legs bent backward at the knees like a bird's, and its face. The face had no features except for a mouth that split its head from ear to ear, filled with row after row of needle-sharp teeth. Dark liquid, not water, too thick to be water, dripped from its chin onto my carpet. I couldn't move. couldn't breathe. The thing's mouth opened wider than any mouth should be able to open, and that wet breathing got louder. The smell hit me then, like rotten meat and stagnant water. It took a step into the room, the backward bent legs making its movement jerky and unnatural, those massive hands swinging at its sides, fingers twitching. My survival instinct finally kicked in. I swung the bat as hard as I could. It connected with the thing's ribs with a solid thunk, but the bat just bounced off like I'd hit a concrete wall. The impact sent vibrations up my arms, making me drop the weapon. The creature didn't even flinch. Instead, it reached for me with one of those huge hands. I ducked under its arm and ran. My shoulder slammed into the door frame as I bolted past it, but I barely felt the pain. Pure adrenaline drove me down the hallway toward the front door. Behind me, I heard it moving, those wet footsteps speeding up, getting closer. I reached the front door and grabbed the handle. It didn't turn. The door wouldn't open. I looked down. The deadbolt was unlocked. The chain wasn't on, but the door wouldn't budge, like it had been welded shut. The footsteps stopped. Hot breath hit the back of my neck, smelling like decay. Slowly, I turned around. It filled the hallway from floor to ceiling now, somehow even larger than before, that grotesque mouth smiling, showing rows of teeth that went all the way down its throat. One massive hand reached for me. I dove to the side, rolling across the living room floor. My shoulder hit the coffee table, sending magazines scattering. The creature followed, its head brushing against the ceiling, leaving wet marks on the white paint. I scrambled to my feet and ran for the kitchen. My phone was still there on the counter, charging. I grabbed it, fingers trembling as I tried to dial 911. The screen was black, dead. Impossible. It had been charging for hours. A shadow fell over me. I turned to see the creature filling the kitchen doorway, its body contorted to fit through the opening, those hands reaching for me again, fingers spreading wide enough to wrap around my entire torso. I grabbed the first weapon I could find, a knife from the dish rack, the blade still wet from washing. I slashed at the nearest hand. The knife cut deep into the gray flesh, but instead of blood, black water poured from the wound. It splashed onto the floor, hissing and steaming where it touched. The creature made a sound then, a high-pitched keening that made my teeth vibrate and my ears pop. The wounded hand withdrew, but the other one shot out, faster than I could react. Fingers like steel cables wrapped around my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. The creature lifted me off the ground effortlessly, pulling me closer to that terrible face. The mouth opened wider and wider, jaw unhinging like a snake, the stench of death rolling over me in waves, row after row of teeth gleaming in the dim light from the window. In desperate panic, I stabbed the knife into its wrist. More black water gushed out, running down my arm. Where it touched my skin, it burned like acid. I screamed in pain. The creature's grip loosened for just a second. I twisted free, landing hard on the kitchen floor. Black water was everywhere now, eating holes in the linoleum, steam filling the air, carrying that rotting smell. I ran for the bathroom, the only room left with a door I could close behind me. The creature's keening grew louder, making the windows rattle in their frames. I slammed the bathroom door and turned the lock, knowing it wouldn't hold for long. The bathroom window was small, but I might be able to squeeze through. I climbed onto the toilet and reached for the latch. The door exploded inward, showering me with splinters. A hand bigger than my entire head reached through the doorway. I lost my balance and fell, cracking my head against the sink. Everything went fuzzy. I lay on the bathroom floor, blood trickling down my face, looking up at the creature as it squeezed its massive body through the doorway. Its mouth opened once more, but this time, something else emerged from its throat, a long, black tongue that writhed like a living thing. The tongue touched my leg. Instant, searing pain shot through my body. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My vision started to go dark around the edges. The last thing I saw was that massive mouth descending toward my face, rows of teeth stretching into infinity. Then everything went black. I woke up in my bed. Sunlight streamed through the windows. For a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. Then I saw the holes eaten into my carpet by the black water, the splintered remains of my bathroom door, the handprint pressed deep into the metal of my front door, now visible from the inside too. That was 3 days ago. I haven't slept since then. Every night at exactly 4:47 a.m., I hear those wet footsteps in my kitchen. Every night they get closer to my bedroom. I've tried staying at hotels, sleeping in my car, even just driving all night, but no matter where I am, when that time comes, I hear those footsteps. Last night I found another handprint, this one pressed into the hood of my car. Tonight will be the 4th night. I don't think I'll survive to see a 5th. The sun is setting now. In a few hours, it'll be 4:47 a.m. again. I can already hear water dripping somewhere in my apartment. The sound is getting louder. I don't know what it wants or why it chose me. I don't know if it's something that followed me home from the warehouse or if it's always been here, waiting for someone to notice it. All I know is that once you see it, once it knows you can see it, you can never go back to the way things were. If you ever come home late and find a handprint on your door, one that's too big, too deep, too wrong, don't go inside. Don't try to fight it. Don't try to run. Because once it's found you, it never lets go. And if you hear wet footsteps in the dark, whatever you do, don't look back. The darkness in the woods. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like a warning. If you've ever lived in the country, you know what I mean. The nights are usually alive with sound, crickets, frogs, the distant bark of a dog, the wind in the trees. But sometimes the world just stops. And when it does, you realize how much you depend on those little noises to tell you everything is okay. I'd lived in my house on the edge of the woods for 3 years. It was the kind of place people dream about. Big yard, tall trees, no neighbors for a quarter mile in any direction. My German Shepherd, Max, loved it even more than I did. Every night just before bed, I'd take him out for one last walk around the yard. He'd sniff the air, chase a rabbit if he saw one, and then we'd go inside and lock the doors. It was a routine I never thought twice about, until the night the silence came. It started with the crickets. One moment they were chirping so loud I could barely hear myself think. The next they were gone. Then the frogs stopped. The wind died. Even the leaves on the trees seemed to freeze in place. I stood in my backyard at 11:47 p.m. holding Max's leash, watching him stare at the tree line. His hackles were up, every muscle in his body rigid. I checked my phone again, 11:48. The silence pressed against my ears, thick and unnatural. "Come on, buddy," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet. "Do your business so we can go inside." But Max wouldn't move. His ears were forward, his tail straight out behind him. I'd seen him react to deer, coyotes, even the neighbor's cat, but this was different. He didn't make a sound. No growling, no barking, just staring. I swept my phone's flashlight across the trees. The beam caught the white bark of the birches, the dark trunks of the oaks. Nothing moved, but something felt wrong. The darkness between the trees seemed deeper than usual, like it was swallowing the light. Max's leash went taut as he took 3 slow steps backward, pressing against my legs. I felt his trembling through my jeans. The rational part of my brain said to go inside, that it was just some animal in the woods. But my hand was sweating on the leash, and my heart hammered against my ribs. I took another look at the tree line. The flashlight beam seemed weaker now, like the darkness was eating it. That's when I saw the first movement. A slight shifting of shadows between 2 oak trees. I blinked hard, trying to focus. The darkness rippled again, like black water. Max, inside, now. I started backing up toward the house, trying to keep my eyes on the trees. The motion stopped, but I could feel something watching us. The pressure of its attention made my skin crawl. We were 15 feet from the back door when Max let out a whimper. Not his usual whine for attention or food. This was a sound of pure fear. I looked down at him for just a second. When I looked back up, the darkness between the trees had changed. It had shape now and depth, like a hole had opened in the world. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys to the back door. The metal clinked loudly in the silence, too loudly. The shape in the trees shifted again. It seemed closer, though I hadn't seen it move. I got the door open and pushed Max inside. As I followed him in, I heard something that made my blood run cold, footsteps in the grass behind me. Not animal footsteps. They were too deliberate, too heavy, and they were getting closer. I slammed the door shut and locked it, then hit every light switch I could reach. The kitchen and living room blazed with light. Max ran to the corner and crouched there, trembling. I grabbed my phone to call someone. The police. What would I tell them? That the darkness was walking the woods. The screen showed no signal. Not low bars, no signal at all. I tried the landline, dead silence. No dial tone. Something scraped against the back door. A long, slow sound like nails on wood. I backed away, keeping my eyes fixed on the door. The scraping moved to the window, then it stopped. The kitchen lights flickered once, twice. Max whimpered again. I ran to my bedroom and grabbed the baseball bat from under my bed. When I came back to the kitchen, all the lights were still on, but they seemed dimmer. The air felt thick, hard to breathe. The scraping sound started again, this time at every window at once, like whatever was out there had split into multiple things, or maybe had always been multiple things and they'd just been waiting. I checked my phone again, 11:52. Only 5 minutes had passed since we'd been outside. It felt like hours. The lights flickered again. Longer this time. In the moments of darkness, I heard something new, a sound like wet cloth being torn coming from the walls. When the lights came back on, the windows were completely black, not just dark black, like they'd been painted over. Max started growling, the first aggressive sound he'd made all night. He was staring at the ceiling. I looked up and my throat closed up. The darkness was seeping through the corners where the walls met the ceiling, like black ink spreading through water. I grabbed Max's collar and pulled him toward the front door. We had to get out, had to get to the car. But when I opened the front door, there was only blackness, not night darkness. This was absolute. It swallowed my flashlight beam completely. We retreated to the living room. The darkness was coming through every crack now, pooling on the floor like oil. The lights were barely working, creating islands of dimming yellow in the growing dark. Max's growl turned into a series of sharp barks. He was facing the kitchen doorway. I turned, raising the bat. Something stood in the doorway. It was roughly human-shaped, but wrong, too tall, too thin. Its edges weren't solid. They shifted and wavered like smoke, but its center was the darkest thing I'd ever seen, darker than the blackness around it. It took a step forward. The sound its foot made on the hardwood floor was wet, heavy. Max's barking stopped abruptly. When I glanced at him, he was frozen, every muscle locked. The thing in the doorway tilted what might have been its head. The movement was jerky, unnatural, like it was trying to mimic human motion but didn't quite understand how it worked. My back hit the wall. I hadn't realized I was moving backward. The bat felt useless in my hands, but I gripped it tighter anyway. The thing took another step. The lights dimmed further. I could feel its attention on me like physical pressure. The air grew colder. It raised what might have been an arm. The limb stretched longer than any human arm could, reaching toward me. Its fingers were too long, too numerous. They moved like tentacles. Max suddenly unfroze and launched himself at the thing, teeth bared. His jaws snapped shut on empty air as the figure dissolved into smoke. For a moment, I thought it was gone. Then the smoke rushed forward, surrounding Max. His angry barks turned to yelps of pain, then silence. The smoke pulled back. Max lay on the floor, not moving. No, I swung the bat through the smoke. It passed through with no resistance. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. My breath came out in white clouds. The smoke reformed into the figure, closer now, close enough that I could see there was depth to its darkness, like looking into a well that went down forever. The cold radiating from it burned my skin. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The figure reached for me again. Its fingers brushed my cheek, sending jolts of icy pain through my skull. Images flashed through my mind, endless darkness, shapes that couldn't exist, a hunger older than time. The lights went out completely. I felt more fingers on my face, my neck, my chest. Each touch was like being stabbed with an icicle. The thing was all around me now. I couldn't see it in the darkness, but I could feel its hunger. My heart was beating so fast it hurt. I couldn't breathe. The cold was inside me now, spreading through my veins. My thoughts were getting sluggish. Something warm pressed against my leg. Max. He was up, pressing close, whining softly. The sound cut through the fog in my head. I swung the bat again, this time with all my strength. It hit something solid. The figure screeched, a sound like metal tearing, like mines breaking. The cold loosened its grip. I ran. I couldn't see anything, but I knew my house, 3 steps to the front door. I slammed into it, shoulder first, felt it give way. Max was right behind me. We burst out into the night, real night, with stars and a quarter moon. The crickets were singing. Frogs croaked in the distance. I ran to my car, Max right beside me. My hands shook so badly I dropped the keys twice before getting the door open. We got in. I started the engine and backed out of the driveway so fast I hit the mailbox. As we sped away, I looked in the rearview mirror. My house was dark, but it was just regular darkness. The thing was gone, or at least I couldn't see it anymore. I drove to a motel 50 miles away, paid cash. Max wouldn't leave my side, not even to eat or drink. We sat on the bed, both of us trembling, until sunrise. I called in sick to work, spent the day making arrangements. By noon, I had a real estate agent lined up to sell the house. By evening, I had a small apartment in the city, rented month to month. I never went back to the house. I hired people to pack up my things, told the real estate agent to sell it as is. She probably thought I was crazy, taking such a loss on the property. Let her think that. It's been 6 months. Max and I live in the apartment now. The city noises bother him sometimes, sirens, traffic, people, but he doesn't complain. Neither of us misses the quiet of the countryside. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I think about that night, about what would have happened if Max hadn't gotten up when he did, about what that thing wanted, what it was. But mostly, I try not to think about it at all. I keep the lights on at night, and when I hear the crickets through my apartment window, I'm grateful for the noise. Max still sleeps pressed against my leg. Sometimes he whimpers in his sleep, and I wonder if he dreams about it. I wake him up when he does that. Better not to let those dreams run their course. I check the local news from my old town sometimes. 3 houses in my old neighborhood have gone up for sale in the past 6 months, all sold well below market value. All the families moved out in a hurry. I wonder if they saw it too, if it's still there, hiding in the darkness between the trees, waiting. But I won't go back to find out. Some questions are better left unanswered. The crickets are chirping outside my window right now. Max is sleeping peacefully for once. The city lights shine through my blinds, keeping the darkness at bay. That's enough. It has to be enough. But sometimes, when I'm almost asleep, I feel phantom fingers on my face, cold as death. And I wonder if it followed us, if it's just waiting for the right moment for me to let my guard down. So I keep the lights on, and I listen to the crickets, and I try to convince myself that as long as I can hear them, everything is okay. But I know better now. I know that when the crickets stop, the real darkness begins. The cemetery runner. If you've ever worked late-night delivery, you know the city changes after midnight. The streets empty out, the lights seem harsher, and the familiar neighborhoods you drive through every day start to feel like a different world. You get used to the silence, the weird customers, the occasional close call with a raccoon or a drunk driver. But nothing prepares you for the things you can't explain, the things that follow you home. I've been doing late-night deliveries for 3 years. The pay is decent, especially with tips, and the roads are empty. Tuesday night started like any other shift. I had a stack of orders from that new Thai place downtown, mostly going to college students cramming for finals. The GPS kept trying to route me around Foster Hill Cemetery, adding an extra 10 minutes to each trip. After the 3rd delivery, I decided to save some time and cut through the cemetery grounds. Other drivers did it all the time. The cemetery gates were always open, some historical preservation rule from back when it was first built in 1843. The narrow access road wound between sections of tilting headstones and crumbling monuments. My headlights swept across names weathered almost to nothing, the shadows of iron crosses and stone angels stretching out across browning grass. I kept my speed down to avoid bottoming out on the bumpy road. The suspension in my Honda Civic wasn't great even when it was new, and that was 140,000 miles ago. The Thai food in my passenger seat filled the car with the smell of pad Thai and green curry. My stomach growled. Maybe I'd treat myself to some leftovers if any orders got canceled. About halfway through the cemetery, movement caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just shadows from my headlights playing across the gravestones. Then I saw it clearly, a figure sprinting between the rows of headstones, moving way faster than any normal person could run. They crossed about 50 feet of open ground in the time it took me to blink. I hit the brakes. My takeout orders slid forward and thumped against the dashboard. I squinted through the windshield, trying to spot the runner again. Nothing moved except branches swaying in the wind. Just tired, I muttered, brain playing tricks. I've been doing doubles all week to cover for another driver who was out sick. Lack of sleep could make you see all kinds of weird stuff. I started driving again, a little faster now. The sooner I got through this place, the better. I kept my eyes locked straight ahead on the road. Don't look at the graves. Don't look for movement in the shadows. Just drive. Something flashed past in my peripheral vision, this time on the passenger side, fast, too fast, like a video being played at double speed. I jerked the wheel and nearly clipped a marble headstone. My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't help looking this time. In the red glow of my brake lights, I saw a trail of footprints in the frost-covered grass. They led straight toward my car, stopping just a few feet from the passenger door. The prints were deep, like whoever made them had been running hard, really hard. I hit the gas. The engine whined as I accelerated down the narrow cemetery road, not caring about the suspension anymore. I kept checking my mirrors, but all I could see were shadows and stone monuments in the fading red glow of my taillights. The rest of my shift was a blur. I delivered the Thai food on autopilot, barely registering the customer or their tips. By the time I finished my last order at 2 a.m., I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing in the cemetery. Sleep deprivation could do strange things to your mind. I pointed my car toward home, taking the long way around Foster Hill. No more shortcuts tonight. The roads were empty except for the occasional semi-truck. My eyelids felt heavy. Just 15 more minutes and I'd be home in bed. A few blocks from my apartment, I had to stop for gas. The fluorescent lights of the gas go made everything look harsh and artificial. I was the only customer. The night clerk didn't even look up from his phone when I went inside to pay. Back at my car, I noticed something that made my whole body go cold. There were muddy footprints on the passenger side of my Honda. They started a few inches from the door and continued along the side of the car, as if someone had been running alongside me. The mud was reddish-brown, the same color as the soil in Foster Hill Cemetery. I walked around the car in a daze, following the prints. They went all the way to the back bumper, then just stopped, like whoever made them had vanished into thin air. My hands shook as I opened the driver's door. The inside of the car smelled different. Under the lingering scent of Thai food, there was something else, something musty and organic, like old leaves in wet earth. I drove home, doing exactly the speed limit, hands clenched on the steering wheel. Every red light felt like it lasted an hour. I kept checking my mirrors, but the streets behind me were empty. When I finally parked outside my apartment building, I ran inside without looking back. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time I started to drift off, I'd jerk awake, thinking I heard footsteps running past my second-floor window. Around 4 a.m., I finally fell into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, everything felt distant and unreal, like a bad dream. The muddy footprints were still there on my car, but they looked less sinister in the daylight. I told myself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe some kid had played a prank while I was delivering food. Maybe another driver had splashed mud on my car. Maybe. My phone buzzed, a text from my supervisor. Driver shortage tonight. Need you to cover the late shift again. Time and a half. I stared at the message for a long time. The smart thing would be to say no, take a night off, get some real sleep. But my rent was due next week and time and a half was time and a half. Okay, I texted back, I'll do it. The sun was setting when I pulled into the Thai restaurant's parking lot to start my shift. I had a new rule, no cutting through Foster Hill Cemetery, no matter how much time it would save. I'd take the long way around, stick to well-lit streets. The first few hours of my shift were normal, students ordering pad Thai, families getting spring rolls and curry, the usual Tuesday night crowd. I kept to main roads, even when my GPS tried to route me through the cemetery. The detour added time to each delivery, but it was worth it for peace of mind. Around 10:30 p.m., I got an order going to an address right on the other side of Foster Hill. Even taking the long way around would add 20 minutes to the delivery time. The customer had already called twice, asking where their food was. I sat in my car, staring at the GPS. The cemetery route would take 7 minutes. The safe route would take 27. The customer was already angry. My rating would take a hit. Too many low ratings, and I'd lose my spot in the priority queue for orders. This is stupid, I said out loud. It's just a cemetery. Nothing happened last night. You were tired and seeing things. Before I could talk myself out of it, I turned onto the road leading to Foster Hill's gates. The entrance looked different tonight, darker. The iron gates cast long shadows in my headlights as I drove through them. I felt a pressure change in my ears, like when you drive up a steep hill. I kept my eyes straight ahead, focusing on the access road. Don't look at the graves. Don't look for movement. Just drive. Get through as fast as possible. Halfway through the cemetery, my phone lost signal. The GPS screen went black. Great. Just great. I knew the route well enough to finish the delivery, but being cut off from communication made me nervous. The access road curved around a large marble mausoleum. As I turned the corner, my headlights swept across something that made me slam on the brakes. Footprints. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, crisscrossing the road ahead of me. They were pressed deep into the dirt, like they'd been made by someone running at incredible speed, and they were fresh. I put the car in reverse. To hell with the delivery, to hell with my rating. I wasn't staying here another second. The engine revved, but the car didn't move. The wheels spun in place, kicking up gravel. I looked in my rearview mirror and felt my stomach drop. More footprints were appearing on the road behind me, materializing out of nowhere, one after another, getting closer to my car. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The footprints reached my back bumper. Then they started appearing along the driver's side of the car, heading toward the front. Something moved in my peripheral vision. I turned my head slowly, fighting against every instinct that told me not to look. A face pressed against my driver's side window, a human face, but wrong. The skin was gray and sunken, the eyes completely black, the mouth stretched into an impossibly wide grin showing too many teeth. I threw the car into drive and floored it. The tires caught traction and shot forward. In my side mirror, I saw a figure running beside the car. It was keeping pace easily, even though my speedometer showed 40 miles per hour, 50, 60. The figure's movements were wrong. Its legs pumped too fast, like a video being played at triple speed. Its arms swung at impossible angles, but it matched my car's speed exactly, staying right alongside me. I reached the cemetery gates doing 70. As I shot through them, the figure disappeared, just vanished between 1 second and the next. In my rearview mirror, I could see Foster Hill Cemetery receding into the darkness. Nothing moved between the graves. My phone came back to life, GPS rerouting to account for my new position. The pressure in my ears released. Normal street sounds filtered back in distant traffic, a dog barking, the hum of power lines. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and sat there shaking for 20 minutes. When I finally worked up the courage to look, there were fresh footprints all along the side of my car. They started at the back bumper and went all the way to the front wheel well. The mud was still wet. I called my supervisor and told him I was done for the night. Family emergency. He wasn't happy, but I didn't care. I drove straight home, taking main roads the whole way. Every time I stopped at a red light, I checked my mirrors for running figures. That was 3 days ago. I haven't gone back to work, haven't answered my supervisor's calls. The footprints are still on my car. I can't bring myself to wash them off. Sometimes at night, I hear running footsteps outside my apartment, fast footsteps, too fast. I found a new job today, stocking shelves at a grocery store, day shift only. The pay isn't as good as deliveries, but at least I never have to drive through Foster Hill Cemetery again. But here's the thing that really scares me. I keep getting notifications from my delivery app, even though I deleted it from my phone. Orders going to addresses on the other side of the cemetery. The suggested route always cuts straight through Foster Hill, and sometimes late at night, I see my car's headlights turn on by themselves. I think something followed me home from that cemetery. Something that runs too fast and grins too wide. Something that wants me to go back. I'm writing this all down because I need someone to know what happened. Maybe someone else has seen it too. Maybe someone knows what it is or how to make it go away. All I know is that I'm not making any more deliveries through Foster Hill Cemetery. And if you're a driver in this area, neither should you. Take the long way around. The extra time is worth it, because whatever is running between those graves, it isn't human. And once it notices you, it doesn't forget. I hear footsteps outside my window now, running footsteps. I'm on the second floor. They're getting closer. The rooftop intruder. There's a strange comfort in routine, especially when you work alone at night. For 8 years, I've been the janitor at the Riverside office building, a 20-story glass and steel tower that empties out by 6 p.m. every weekday. I know every inch of this place, the echo of my mop on the marble lobby, the way the lights hum on the 14th floor, the stubborn lock on the men's room by the conference center. I know the building's moods, its creaks and sighs, the way the air changes with the seasons. I thought I knew all its secrets, but I was wrong. It started 3 weeks ago, with footsteps on the roof. I was finishing my rounds on the 19th floor, mopping up a spilled coffee trail someone had left behind when I heard it, a slow, steady thud above my head. At first, I thought it was just the HVAC system kicking on, or maybe a bird landing on the gravel. But the sound kept going, deliberate, measured, like someone packing back and forth. I froze, mop in hand, listening. The footsteps stopped, then started again, moving from the south side of the building toward the north. My heart pounded. I'm the only one with access to the roof. The heavy steel door is secured with both a deadbolt and a padlock. The keys hang on my belt loop, master set number 4, issued to me by building management when I started this job. Nobody else has copies. I check the roof access door 3 times every night, always locked, always secure. The next morning, I went up to the roof first thing, just to be sure. The door was locked, the padlock untouched. But near the air conditioning units, I found 3 cigarette butts, Marlboro Red, still fresh, the filters stained with lipstick. I don't smoke. I swept them up, dumped them in my garbage bag, and double-checked the locks before heading back down. That night, the footsteps came again. This time, I was on the 20th floor emptying trash cans when I heard them, slow, heavy, deliberate. I pressed my ear to the ceiling. The sound was clearer now, like boots crunching on gravel. I finished my shift with a knot in my stomach. The next day, I found more cigarette butts, and this time, footprints in the gravel, size 11 or 12 work boots, different from my size 9 sneakers. I took pictures with my phone and sent them to my supervisor. He just told me to make sure I was locking up properly. I was, every single night. A week passed. The footsteps came and went, always at night, always when I was alone. Sometimes they were slow and heavy, sometimes light and quick, almost playful. I started to dread the last hour of my shift when the building was at its quietest and the shadows seemed to stretch a little longer. One night I decided to set a trap. Nothing dangerous, just some fishing lines strung across the gap by the biggest AC unit. tied to an empty soda can. If anyone crawled through, they'd knock it over and I'd hear it from the floor below. I set up a motion-activated camera hidden behind a vent and a voice recorder under some gravel. For 3 nights, nothing happened. The can stayed upright, the camera's memory card was empty. The recorder picked up only the wind and the distant hum of traffic. I started to think I was losing my mind, that maybe the footsteps were just the building settling, or my imagination running wild after too many years of solitude. Then on the 4th night, everything changed. I was cleaning the 20th floor bathrooms when I heard the can clatter across the roof. My heart nearly stopped. I grabbed my flashlight and ran to the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. The roof access door was still locked, the padlock secure. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in. When I finally pushed it open, the cool night air hit my face. The roof was empty. My flashlight beam swept across the gravel, the AC units, the low wall that ringed the edge. No one was there, but the can was gone and the fishing line had been snapped clean. I found the can later, wedged under a vent on the far side of the roof. I checked the camera. The battery was dead, even though I'd put in fresh ones that morning. The memory card was blank. The voice recorder was gone. That's when I noticed something else. A scuff mark on the ledge, like someone had sat there, dangling their legs over the edge, watching the city below. My stomach churned. I backed away from the ledge and hurried to the door, double-checking the locks, triple-checking them. I practically ran through my final tasks, wanting to get out of there as fast as possible. The next day, I arrived early. I needed to check something. I headed straight to the basement and pulled out the building blueprints. They were old and yellowed, but still legible. I spread them across my break room table and started studying the roof access points. There was the main door I always used, a second door that was permanently sealed during renovations in 2012, and squinting at the faded text, an old maintenance hatch on the northwest corner, supposedly covered by the new HVAC system. I spent my lunch break on the roof, investigating the area around the largest AC unit. Sure enough, there was a slight gap between the unit's base and the roof surface. If someone was determined enough, they might be able to squeeze through. But that was crazy. Who would go to that much trouble just to smoke cigarettes on a roof? I decided to set up another trap, this time with a motion sensor and a camera hidden inside a weatherproof box. I checked the batteries twice, made sure the memory card was empty, and set the sensor to send an alert to my phone. That night the footsteps started again, lighter this time, almost playful, like whatever was up there knew I was listening. I should have gone up, should have checked the door, but my legs wouldn't move. I sat in the break room staring at the monitor, watching the minutes tick by. At 3:17 a.m. my phone buzzed, a motion alert from the roof. I forced myself to go up, flashlight in hand, heart pounding. The door was locked, the padlock secure. I unlocked it, pushed it open, and stepped out onto the gravel. The air was colder than it should have been. My breath came out in white clouds. The city lights stretched out below, a grid of yellow and white. I walked to the spot where I'd set the camera. The box was open, the camera gone. The motion sensor was smashed, wires dangling. I turned around, shining my flashlight across the roof. That's when I saw her, a woman standing at the far edge, her back to me. She wore a long coat, her hair blowing in the wind. She turned just for a second and I saw her face, or where her face should have been. There was just darkness, a void where features should be. She smiled, or maybe the darkness shifted in a way that looked like a smile. Then she stepped backward, over the edge of the roof, and vanished. I ran to the spot where she'd been standing. There was nothing there, no footprints, no sign anyone had ever been there at all. I backed away, heart racing, and hurried to the door, locking it behind me. I called the police. They arrived 20 minutes later and found nothing. No cigarettes, no footprints, just my broken camera and the smashed motion sensor. They told me to call building security next time. Building security told me to call my supervisor. My supervisor told me to take a few days off, but I can't. I need this job, and more than that, I need to know what's happening up there. So here I am, sitting in my break room at 3:00 a.m., writing this all down while I wait. I brought a new camera tonight, set up another motion sensor by the AC unit, hit a voice recorder under some gravel. The footsteps started again 10 minutes ago. They're different this time. Lighter, almost playful, like whatever, is up their nose. I'm listening. I should go check. The door is only 50 feet away. I have my flashlight, my phone, my camera. Evidence, that's all I need. Proof that I'm not crazy, but I can't move. My legs are lead, my throat is dry. The footsteps are getting closer to the door now, slower, deliberate. Something scrapes against the metal once, twice. The handle turns. I know I locked it. I always lock it. But the handle is turning and there are shadows under the door. They come through the walls. They always come through the walls. I should have checked the hatch. I should have left when I had the chance. If you ever find yourself alone in a building at night and you hear footsteps where there shouldn't be any, don't go looking for answers. Don't set traps. Don't try to catch what doesn't want to be caught. Some secrets are better left alone. Some doors are better left locked. And if you ever find yourself on a rooftop, staring out at the city lights, and you feel like someone is watching you from the shadows, don't turn around. Don't look for the source of the footsteps. Just go back inside, lock the door, and wait for sunrise. Because some things walk the rooftops at night, and once they know you're listening, they never really leave.